Thank you very much for this kind introduction. So I'm very happy to participate here from Sweden. And also this introduction by Dr. Badmus is an excellent example of the use of these webinars, because we actually had contact from one of the innovation webinars which I was chairing in summer. And then we exchanged information, and then it led to this invitation. So having this exchange, even online, is useful for building network and establishing larger avenues. And what I will try to give an example of, because I'm so grateful for being invited to this conference, the 4th International Conference, and Professor Latif has communicated with me and all the organizing team and so on at the university. And what I will try to give an example of is that in the coming talks during this conference, you will have examples of different nanotechnologies and examples from science and the research and possible technology application areas. And now I will start with trying to have a big picture of the nano, where it can head to if we are trying to make more usefulness of this. So in line with this conference topic, we should make more usefulness from the resources and for the humanity, for the climate and all those things. And then we actually need to think where our findings in the research can position in a larger perspective. So this is the intention of my what I will talk about. So I will share my screen. Let's go back to the beginning. So here I will talk about innovation perspectives. And I will say here already that these perspectives are very much given by you who are doing the findings and want to take them further. And then such things like the Center of Excellence are very useful opportunities to guide in the right direction and put it in the big perspective of how it can become usefulness in a broader context. But always the people are doing the important things. Let me give a little bit background. So since you are in Nigeria and I'm in Sweden, you probably have never heard about me at all. I became a PhD student in the 90s, so it's quite many years now. And my particular focus is growth of materials. So then I started as a PhD student to study silicon carbide growth. So I was very active in the lab, and just very general, the silicon carbide, the process which I have been exploring in different ways is based on the sublimation of material, and when you have the vapor species which are formed, they are transported to a surface, and then crystal is growing. And of course this is a complex picture, many things happening, which is very good from the publication point of view. So this is what I started with, and this was my genuine interest in materials, to grow the material and find out conditions for how to progress. And the aim of this material at that time was to make silicon carbide and create wafers, so there could be development of the applications. So in the 90s it was very big programs all over the world for silicon carbide, and the main motivation is that it's useful for the power devices. So that was that made this avenue to grow very much in the 90s. I usually say that this is the good old 90s, when it was a lot of activity, a lot of funding and so on. So that was the first motivation, and why I also became a PhD student. And my particular, or one of the methods which I was contributing to develop, was this general method, but we shortened the distance and changed the temperature and so on. So it was not growth of bulk material to produce wafers. It was more to make thick films of silicon carbide. And here's an example that we managed to get thick films of silicon carbide. And such thick films are needed because when you want to transform 10,000 volt for power devices, then you need quite larger thickness of the material to handle the conversions. So that was part of my thesis. And in 1999, I got my thesis. So I wrote this one at that time. And very nice, in the material which we were growing, we had very nice characteristic features. In the photoluminescence, there are some certain peaks which appear when the material quality is high, and the widths of them are narrow. So this is very good. And also in the XRD rocking curves, when we explored it, it had very narrow width of the rocking curve and so on. So this was good indication of good quality material. And also we explored the surfaces because they must be smooth in order to realize devices. So there in the growth, there is step bunching and step flow growth, which are the natural growth mechanisms. So we explored that one also and studied using AFM, atomic force microscopy, the surfaces of these materials, and also TEM to see more details even, so on. And that was very nice from that point of view. But to our surprise, or the layers which we were growing, they were not useful for the power devices. And even though there was nice quality and all of those details, the layers were not pure enough to handle the power conversion. So this was highlight of my thesis in 1999, a method which was not useful. Okay. Then, a few years later, came Satoshi Kamiyama, who proposed a new type of white LED for general lighting. And then if you have donors and acceptors, then you can have a recombination from them. And if you do this in silicon carbide with a certain polytype, 6H silicon carbide polytype, and you do it in 2 layers with different acceptors, you get 2 different levels where there are transitions. And the unique feature here is that then there are broad curves, and then it comes out in the visible region if you're doing this in 6H silicon carbide. And for that, he needed thick layers of silicon carbide. So I was, oh yes, yahoo! I have a method. So then I started collaboration with this prestigious group at Mayo University. And in this case, the research was led by Professor Satoshi Kamiyama. So then the finding of the method which we developed originally, which didn't work out, found its place in another technology avenue. And of course, the things here, when you have ideas and so on, there's international collaboration. And this is also what you will see in your future endeavors. When you have findings, you need to have complementary sets, either if it's material or characterization or application devices and so on. Then it will most likely become an international context. So you will also collaborate more and more internationally. And it was a nice avenue because it was new research which has not been explored previously. So it was a big challenge because it was so many new things. But it worked out. So here Professor Kamiyama demonstrates that there is light coming out from the silicon carbide material, which we have grown, and then they produce a simplified LED for general lighting. And the advantage here is that it comes from a semiconductor material. It's not a phosphor, like in the conventional technology, and then you don't need rare earth metals. And when you handle the combination of these 2 broad spectra, it's a pure white light. There's no blue tone or so, like in the nitride-based LED. So this made a particular niche avenue for the LED. And there are many things still to be resolved about that, But from a research point of view, it's an opportunity, and also from technology point of view, if we can commercialize this once we have matured it. And also there are other collaborations here which we initiated, so collaboration with the Denmark Technical University and Erlangen University. We created a network here, so I was initiating this collaboration in Europe, and then we had workshops where we discussed this new topic and related topics and so on, and had these personal exchanges which are so important to continue over a longer time. So we had these workshops. So on the right side you see, on the top picture you see me, Professor Kamiyama, and also Professor Akasaki. They are from that group who got the Nobel Prize for the blue LED. So there was Japan-Europe collaboration which was initiated. So that was an example how a method came into usefulness in another avenue than the intended one. And another feature with the silicon carbide is that when we heat it up, we have the silicon and carbon. They form species, and if everything goes well, then there's a growth of the silicon carbide, which is nice. But sometimes when we had poor conditions or other things which were influencing, we had more silicon leaving the surface from our material than the carbon. So this is very bad from the silicon carbide point of view. And the good thing here, which we realized, was that there was a thin graphitic layer on the silicon carbide. So from growth point of view, it was embarrassing to have this. But then one researcher from Chalmers said that I would like to have a look at this graphitic layer because I think it's quite interesting. So we intentionally tried to grow the thin graphitic layers. So we started the process, and we have a process where we explore this around a certain temperature. So we started 20 years ago for the thin graphitic layers, and then there was collaboration with the Chalmers, and they showed that it was very nice quality of the graphite. So almost like the quality of the natural graphite, which you can find in a mine's longest in there somewhere. And we were curious, so we made these graphitic layers thinner. And then 2005, we had one layer of carbon on the silicon carbide. So then we were in the graphene avenue. We did not realize this, what it was useful for, but it was interesting from the growth point of view. And then we continued, and then we had master thesis studies and some other collaborations which continued over time. And then in 2010, we could actually demonstrate very high quality of the material, and it was demonstrated by quantum resistance. So the quantum Hall effect was very nice. And we had one of the nice papers in this journal. So usually from the materials growth point of view, it's very difficult to come into prestigious journals because you always need to demonstrate some application type of part of these things. But then we had really good quality of the graphene on silicon carbide. But from the beginning, it was a graphitization which was not good for the growth. And there we can come back to this step flow growth and step bunching which appears on the silicon carbide and also some other materials to understand it more, how we can form monolayer over a larger area intentionally and so on. So we explored this a lot. And now we can do this in a wafer size. So here my supervisor from that time, we did this, Rositsa Yakimova. She initiated this research and she was supervisor for me there, and we still collaborate on the silicon carbide and related growth activities. So there we had very nice quality, and then researchers wanted to collaborate with us, so we distributed more material and more collaborations. So at one point we could not actually focus on our projects because we were distributing material for free. So then we were thinking, how can we get rid of these researchers who want free material so we can focus on what we are paid to do from the research projects. Our salaries come from research projects, so this is very important for us. then we're thinking, we ask researchers to pay for the material. And then researchers usually don't have budget for that and so on. But here it turned out that they actually wanted to pay. So then we made our first startup. And that's when I became interested in, commercialization of our research findings and either make a technology transfer, which we did in the fluorescent silicon carbide, or make a startup company. Maybe this is one interesting avenue. And that's how I came into this avenue of innovation much more. So this was 2005, I had little interest, in 2010 and 2011 we formed this company and so on. And now I'm very much active with the research and innovation. And at that time I was working with presentations of the startup and many of those things. And it gave me additional experiences and also additional network when I was doing these activities. And you have probably heard about the graphene, and it's a big interest worldwide. And in Europe, there is a graphene flagship. So European Commission has put 1 billion euro for European research to move to markets. So this is big project with many involved and big money and so on. And I participated in those meetings in the graphene flagship in the beginning. And then also in Sweden, we have a national innovation program on graphene. So I participated in that one also. I was in the board. And that gave me some experiences in thinking in a larger context, not in the physics and the growth and the small things which I was used to and which was my main interest from the beginning. But then that's how I came into those avenues of how to make more usefulness in broader contexts. And let's come back to the white LED. So the nitride material, which was developed by Isamu Akasaki for the blue LED, and Amano and Nakamura, they got the Nobel Prize in 2014 for the blue LED. And now that is used. You have the blue LED and phosphor, which is making the white LED for the general lighting and saving tremendous amounts of energy, and became a key enabling technology which contributed to the society in a big perspective. So it's a big impact. But they could not realize this from the beginning. They were interested in the material, they made some innovations, and then over time it came into these avenues. But the first materials findings, they were in the 70s when Akasaki got interested in these things, and then they developed it further. They made one machine for the growth of high quality material, and then they needed PN junctions, so they made another furnace for getting PN junctions after ion implantations and so on. And then you had blue light coming out, and 1993 was the blue LED commercialized. And over time, that went into the white LED, which is now everywhere in the society all over the world and makes so big impact. And it's not only for the lighting, it's also used like in art and so on. You can have different colors fine-tuning of the white light, either more blue or more warm, like in the yellow. And then you can view art in different ways to get different perspectives from the aesthetics just by changing the light. So one painting can look different depending on the light which you put there. So the white LED broadened, and also in cities you have LEDs which now create different designs and so on, because you don't need the electricity. Like in Sweden we have 220 volt in the wall plug, but you don't need such things for the LED, and it uses so little that you can have many of them. And here is a building which changes colors every few seconds or so in Brussels, which I took. So the technology broadened into other avenues. And what is now discussed, when I had an example from Professor Amano at the European MRS conference, when he was talking about this research finding, it took 30 years before we had the white LED. And now investors and so on. They want similar key enabling technologies in other domains, but they want it in less than 10 years, which is impossible. But we need to reduce this. So what they're doing in Japan is that they facilitate students who want to become entrepreneurs. They encourage them. And those who are inventors and who want to make reproducibility of the research findings, so there are production technologies, they also encourage to focus their interest. And those who want to develop new technologies, they can be encouraged that. And in that program, you have mentors, internships, and so on. So that's a big program to facilitate more technology and innovations come into usefulness. And in Europe, 2011, the European Commission proposed research and innovation strategies for regions. So then they said that, oh, we have given you money before, but there should be more usefulness. So we want like you to encourage all regions in Europe, find your avenues where you are strong, and then focus a little bit more in them, specialize a little bit. So this is called smart specialization for how to make more usefulness in the region. And then in our region, I was participating in this working group in the topic of advanced materials. So that's why I have some experiences in this also. And what is now happening is that you have these different regions and different experts, and then you find other regions where there's complementary things, and then you create exchange, and then you move ahead together. We don't need to do it ourselves, we do it together. So this becomes like its own activity. And then over time, it will be collaboration between regions, and then it will be collaborations between countries. And of course, it will be international over time. So this is the long-term perspective of these things. And here with the regions, when they promote areas to grow, then they find many partners, and those partners basically make a value chain. And when we propose our research findings, we have materials growth, someone makes an application, and someone makes a system. That's also value chain. So basically, region and technology, they talk about the same things, but there's no overlap. And this is why it's good to communicate about these things. For example, the Center of Excellence, and if the ministry supports this, then we have the larger perspective. But for the larger perspective to work out, we need the actual technologies and the innovators. And then with these things, when it's nanotechnology, it can have big impacts, and it becomes broader because nanotechnology is not only one discipline, it's many different disciplines, and then you can create something really nice. And that's why this exchanges online and so on to meet new people is important. This is an example when I was giving a presentation at the startup weekend in India. So then I could have exchange there and so on. And this became possible by this online exchange. So we can have more of those just to facilitate more things to happen. But again, even if we have the visions, Center of Excellence, even if the ministry would like to promote things, we need the things from the lab. The things you are finding there, they are the core, they are the real things. Without these things, the big things cannot exist. But also our findings in the lab, they need to find a strategic way to go so it becomes usefulness in a broader context. So that's why this lab activity is so important, and that's why I really like the formation of this NanoPlus group in 2014. It was formed, and then you focus this around your own strengths, and now you broaden it to have visibility in media, and you have conferences and these online exchanges, the 30 webinars and so on, which has been, so it's growing in very nice ways. So that's why I like it very much. But at the end, it is about coming from the science and interactions in the networks and communities. And when I have been during this year I participated and collaborated with the NanoSmart Global, which is a nano society, and there we have had innovation webinars discussing different things, so in a similar way what we are doing now. So I hope now that you have got some flavor, because in the rest of the talks during this today and tomorrow you will hear some more details, and they should be put into perspectives, and at the end it is about finding collaborations in different ways with technology, but also the people, because it's personal chemistry. When you make a team, you want to collaborate with people where you have good exchange, so it's not anything which is stressed and so on, and then everything will happen sort of naturally in that way. So with that, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of my experiences in the research and innovation, and hopefully that will inspire you to take your own lead in these things, and then exchange with also the management of this at the university in these ways to facilitate more things to happen. So thank you very much.